All right, cool. Thanks so much for joining us today. We've got Tom Preston from Specright. We got a lot to cover, so we're going to jump right into this thing. Tom, man, how you doing?
Excellent. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. So Specright's been a part of the Packaging in a Box podcast for a while now, for like a year and a half. And we haven't had a chance to talk to you guys and kind of learn what you guys do. Talk to a lot of different brands, and some of the brands will kind of bring you up and say, hey, we've kind of heard about Specright. Does it do this? Does it do that? And I said, you know what? Let me just have Tom on and we'll ask him.
I'll do my best to give you an answer.
So it's a specification management platform, right? That I'm going to put in all my specifications. What type of specifications are we talking about?
Yeah, so it's all the technical elements of a material, dimensions, and an ingredient. It has the certificates. It has the fat content for an ingredient that rolls up to a formula. It has, if in the cosmetics world, it has your INCI numbers and your CAS numbers all associated with it. That's all the technical information. But we also treat specs as events or things that happen. I validated this. My supplier has approved it. I've done a quality audit. I've got a certificate that has an expiry. So we have workflow where that's also spec. It's an event spec, and then that's married up with all of the technical and business related specifications.
IDP Direct, pioneering factory direct sustainable luxury, packaging, logistics, and design. They're not just manufacturers. They're your partners in eco-excellence. IDPdirect.com. If finding your spec data is a wild goose chase around your office, you've got a data problem. Specright is the only cloud-based management specification solution that every brand needs. Because if you don't spec right, you'll spec wrong. Why would a brand want this? And what's happening to brands out there that aren't using a spec management platform?
Sure. So brands come to us with different challenges or different needs. Some of it's being driven by consumers. I want to know more about the materials, the ingredients. I want more transparency. And we hear that in different circles and in different industries in different ways. Some of it's being driven by regulatory changes. So if you're in a cosmetic space in North America, MOCRA is now your new set of regulations and rules that you have to abide by, or the FDA can come knocking at your door and start giving you a little more difficult way of doing business. The others is about just really trying to understand as they grow. Some small, medium-sized businesses start with us just with data and packaging, but as they grow, they realize, wait a minute, I can't do these other offline things in spreadsheets or in SharePoint locations because I need to search based upon not something that was in an email title. I need something more granular. I need some of the attribute or that spec level detail to be able to search so I can make decisions quicker. Mm-hmm. So in transactional moments, what we find our teams are able to conduct scenario analysis on a screen in front of others and share, here's what your pros and cons are for these sustainable packaging options that we're considering. They can take a look at those sustainable packaging decisions because we're linking up with costs, often from an ERP or somewhere else, so they can start doing the balancing act between, well, it costs more, but it's really got a better carbon footprint or better life cycle assessment or impact data. So those are two different use cases, but as you spread to different industry sectors outside of, I use some personal care or beauty examples, but if you look in food, it's about food health, food safety, and quality. If you look into the symphony of assembly that goes into heavy industry, like a Caterpillar, or you mentioned electronics earlier, there's a lot that comes in. Good bit of it is in CAD files and elsewhere, but how does it all come together with work instructions, with materials, so that we know exactly what's going on in our operation, and also can communicate that out to customers, and regulatory bodies.
All right. So I'm still trying to get clarity on what Specright is and where I'm actually going to use it, right? And trying to keep it really simple because we've got a variety of different people that are listening. Everybody from, a young designer just kind of starting out, like, what is Specright? Why do they care? And also we've got, people internally that definitely understand, that are on the regulatory side, which, when we're talking about cosmetics, they're dealing with a lot of this, a lot of changing regulations. They're trying to keep up. I know when I was in, I can't remember where I was anymore, where we kind of we did a demo, and we opened up the application, and there's a few examples, right? And it's like, this is brand X, and it kind of shows you all of the different things that you can do in terms of, like, brand X is using this type of packaging, these dimensions, these specifications on material, then the formulation of the actual product inside. Again, if I'm a designer, I've designed a box that is maybe 400 GSM, and it's printed 4-color process, and it's got a spot UV, and maybe it's on a C1S sheet, and it's being, it's got an auto lock bottom, and it's these dimensions. And I've done my job. Customers approved it. They've fallen in love with it. Now they're going to go quote it somewhere. Or maybe I'm an agency that actually does manufacturing and quoting as a middleman. Now I'm going to go quote it, and I'm going to give you the pricing on it. Now that seems pretty straightforward, right? Like, I design it, I'm going to quote it, and what I designed on my screen is exactly what you're going to get, and it's going to work perfectly, right? Because that's the dream.
Right.
That's not always the case.
Yeah. So let's break that down just a little bit. So if I'm, an auto lock bottom might be the same design as you go from converter to converter, or maybe it's not. With spec level data, with the drawing there, you get a little more precise on it. So it's an auto lock that it has the tabs, all the cuts in the right dimension, and it's very specific. So you're delivering on a consumer expectation, at least from a repeat, that delighted them in the first place.
Right.
Go to the board grade, the CS1, the ink saturation, whatever the attributes we're pulling in. Those can all then be not just replicate this. Here's my more technical or business guidance specific specifications, so that when this is quoted out, let's say you're producing this first time for a European market. Wait a minute, we want to launch this in Brazil. How do we know the capability is the same? That's where you start dropping it into those technical elements to be able to say, hey, supplier X, I know you make cartons, but can you do it with this type of a board? And can you, replicate this ink saturation on it? Or maybe we don't know, but it starts a conversation to ensure that you can. And it begins with the fact base, and it's not assumptive on a finished product that you're sending out as a sample. It really gets a level down. And as a brand owner, I've worked with a lot of marketing teams in food and beauty. Customer perception is absolutely precious. So you want to protect that at all costs, because that is your brand's identity. That's your brand's stature amongst its peers, and more directly, especially in the beauty world, that's the elevation of the experience. You don't want to mess around with that. So you want to protect that and keep those high standards wherever you can.
We talk about board, and a lot of times on the design side, I've got my swatch book of different boards from different paper mills, and I might fall in love with a board, a material that I see here in the US. It's widely available, perfect. Client now, is producing it in Europe. That board may not be available there, or if it is, it's being exported from the US into Europe, or they may be something similar, right? And now when we're looking at similar materials, it may not have the exact same properties, which then are going to lead to color bleed, like a variety of different issues. And I think a lot of times as a designer, you're like, well, yeah, this is a similar material. Let's go with it. Or the manufacturer, because they want to make the sale, they're like, yeah, it'll work exactly the same. But with the spec level data, then are you able then to compare like an MSDS to confirm that, yes, this is the same, or like what are the differences?
Yeah, you have the ability first at an attribute level. It's this board, it's this brightness, it's this GSM, other attributes all the way down. You can compare them right in the system and say, is it exact? Yes or no? And it'll highlight, no, this is different. And then it becomes a question about, well, what do we do about that? Is it close enough? And think of it this way. Part of what we're doing is giving people the ability to speed to a decision. All right. They're not data mining somewhere else. They're not getting a sample in. It's all there. So that scenario analysis, or that comparison that I spoke about, cuts down that exploration to, okay, maybe you haven't picked the one, but of 5 candidates, I'm now down to 2. okay, you save time right there. And you're getting your day back and you're focusing on what you should be doing, which is innovation and looking at suppliers and elsewise, or whatever the role is. The next step would be then to accelerate that conversation, because if your suppliers are in there, well, you can communicate directly with them. Hey, I've seen this. This is what the spec looks like. It's different from yours. Tell me if that's okay. So you can have a conversation in the platform, and then not that you can't have a conversation in email, it's just more streamlined, and now it's all there. So if I'm having a conversation with you, Avelio, and I happen to be on vacation for 2 weeks, you don't have to wait for me to come back and answer an email or fetch it from my email. It's all right there. So there's collaboration tools that help facilitate that decision process as well. It's not always just about the spec data. It's also about the tools that are linked, because that's how we work. We don't work with just technical elements. We work with communication. We work with alignment amongst third-party suppliers, third-party manufacturers sometimes that might be getting that we might be picking the carton or other material supplier for. They have to be aligned with it. And that's how facts kind of help everybody get comfortable with, yeah, we can do this.
A lot of times you don't realize is when you're quoting multiple vendors, the current way and the old way is that you've got multiple vendors out there. You're getting multiple quotes. And sometimes you don't realize that each vendor might have like a house sheet, right? They may have a house board, something that they're buying in bulk, and it's white. It's white enough. It's not the same. So you're not getting an apples to apples comparison. And as a brand, you don't necessarily have the visibility in to each of these to actually compare that, right? Because you might get a sample, it looks similar enough. And at the brand level, like who's really making the decision? It's in procurement, it's in finance. They might bring in creative. You would think it would be an all hands meeting to look at everything, but you can't do that every time. As we know, procurement and creative are not the best of friends inside of brands. So like having the data there, it's like, you're right. It speeds you to a decision and making the right decision for both parties.
Yeah. As you're talking about, art and design and reduction to practice, but let's go to something where there's two elements coming together, a label and a bottle. So if you understand and you're replicating that adhesive from the label, and that's the bottle surface is the same every time, great. Yeah. Chances are anyone in this audience is going to have a story or two where that didn't happen. And that's where we help those kind of conversations as well, because you get more granular on the adhesive, you get more granular on the bottle and its treatment, and whether it's the process itself or it's post-treatment or additives that bloom to the surface. Now we start teasing all that out and saying, well, wait a minute. That's not going to work in that line because this bottle has a blooming agent and this adhesive might not work. That's a little techie, but ultimately someone on the manufacturing line is going to say, that's happened before. So it's wherever we can get as granular as possible. That doesn't crush people with the burden of, I have to have everything just right. No, you have to run your business, but let's give you a little more detail to run the business. And then once you get a little more free time, because you're not chasing data from elsewhere or mining emails, then you can tack those next things on as concentric rings of work to do that helps guide things from a perfection or de-risking a process, or speeds the decision.
Specright outlines this really well in their commercial. The 30-second clip they've got, it's somebody placing an order for packaging, and it's like, all right, well, where's the data? And they're running through the entire office. And they're like, oh, well, so-and-so has it in procurement. So-and-so has it here. And it's like, by the time you get to where it actually is, they open up a file folder, and, it's not a digital document. It's like a quote, basically. Like, here's what the specs are. And as funny as that commercial is, it's like the reality. And you can't compare what you bought in 2019 to what's available today, because you don't necessarily have that granular data. So being able to have it in Specright allows you to compare materials, adhesives, inks, which is, just a small component of what you're actually collecting. Because what was interesting to me as I kind of dig through, and I'll share this on my screen here, is the entirety of it. It's not just packaging, right? It's formulation. Like in this scenario here, we've got ingredients for products, right? And you kind of work your way all the way through. So I would think from a procurement standpoint, like you would want to know everything. You might be the packaging procurement person. So you got all the specifications here. You may be the product procurement person because there's all different departments. They've got to work together and they're not necessarily always sharing the best information.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. And I'll rewind the clock a few years, honestly, a decade plus. You used to have a group of team that were the keepers of the keys, so to speak. They had lived through the trials. They were the tribal elders, so to speak, that knew what would work. And those, we call them technical expert, the senior technical experts or the SMEs. They're still there, but they're not always going to be there. So how are you going to pull that knowledge in and embed that so that someone new to the organization or someone in large organizations that switches from a beverage to a salty snack or something, they're still smart people, but they don't have that tribal, knowledge, that starter kit to keep them from making the mistake of what someone has learned 2 or 3 or 5 years ago. Yeah. That's also where this comes into play, because I look at what, the advancement that happens in any organization is that people grow up into roles, but then go across, because understanding a whole business, particularly in a large organization, is how you gain better perspective. You become a more, the blinders of what you knew are now open to new ways of working or different examples. This is what we're complementing. We don't own it, but we give the teams the ability to put that information in so that they can, again, de-risk a process. You're not making the same mistakes from earlier, or you're cautious enough that maybe I should double check that before we go forward.
Kind of just going back to earlier part of the conversation, you were talking about regulations and, EPR. You mentioned MOLCRA, and there's so many different things that are changing. We got one planet, but every single section of it has its own regulations. If we look at US, every single state, every city has its own regulations. It's impossible to manage everything all in one. And and I have brands that are like, hey, we've got stores in Korea, we've got stores in Portugal. Like, what are the regulations there? Because they can't keep up. And they're really counting on other people to help support them. How can Specright help somebody with all these regulations and manage it?
Start with we're not going to do it alone. We can't keep up with the regulations and keep your spec data and advance things that make it easy to use. That's a recipe for failure. What we have done is we partner with Lorax EPI and they're the keepers of the keys of all the changing regulations in Europe, and they're advancing and in North America. So they're continuing to keep a watch on that. And they are absolute experts at what they do. We're going to complement them with an easier way to exchange the data back and forth based upon those attributes that the municipalities have asked for. I want to tax your packaging based upon its paperboard or its composite non-metal, composite non-plastic, whatever their categories are. That's where we sort out from a material and a component, what is it, to that entity, and automatically get things back so people aren't fat finger typing mistakes, which could lead to revisions or, God forbid, fines. But that's where we start, and that's one example of the partner ecosystem that we have mindset that is prevalent amongst Specright, and whether it's in sustainability or in food safety and compliance, where there's a number of different partners because again, they're experts in what they do. Why? We're not going to go try and compete with them. That would be silly. Let's complement and work together to give the customers and consumers a better answer.
So let's take, for instance, like at the moment, there's new regulation that's bubbling up for paper bags. Are you familiar with the anti-dumping countervailing that's happening with shopping bags at the moment?
Starting to get educated on it. So not quite expert yet, but working our way.
From a retail packaging perspective, there's like a specific set of paper bags coming in from a variety of different countries. They'll have their own sets of duties and fines from like 14% up to 328% in terms of these fines. It's not like one blanket regulation. There's just a variety of them. So on something like that, or anytime that there's new regulation that's happening, then you're not the experts in it, but you're incorporating it into your data to help the brands make the right decisions, right? It's like, okay, these are the constructions, or these are the import numbers for these products, and this is what you can expect. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. And I'll say, this is one of those, it depends. So if the regulation is being maintained in a common area, we can go and set or build that into the rules, right? If it's something that is changing, like EPR in Europe has been, because the governing bodies are changing their criteria, they're changing the additions for that they're going to be watching over and governing, and then UK is doing its own bit that's separate and distinct. So there's a lot of moving parts. That's where we will look for where are their best in class partners that are doing that already, and how can we tap in? How can we get that data and utilize that, or send data from Specright to those applications, so that, because we don't always want to be, we talked about the single pane or a common pane of glass. If that common pane of glass is, this is good enough to go to another system, your ERP system, a QMS system, or something else that's reporting out your social responsibility, your EPR tax, your other attributes that the business is running on. We're agnostic to where it needs to be. We want to make sure we're doing the best thing for our customers in terms of ease of use and trust in the data that's being sent back and forth between those systems.
All right. So how are brands that don't use Specright collecting all the data in order to confirm their EPR taxes?
I don't know all the answers to that, but I have a few examples. We were at an SPC event, and one of the CPG companies, we've all known each other for a while, and we're talking about the common challenges that we're all facing. And the person I spoke to said that, yes, I generate a report for EPR tax once a year. It takes me approximately 6 weeks of mining data, working in offline spreadsheets, validating that with finance, then going back and validating with manufacturing. And as she started explaining it, I got tired just listening to it, because it was a lot of work and back and forth and people involved. And I asked the question is it that it just isn't in one place? Or is it that there is that much complexity that you have to validate? And we kind of landed somewhere in the middle to 3/4 of the way to, it's because it's not in one place and in an organized measure, so that they could run something as a report or sort even create a pivot table in Excel off of common names, because the nomenclature was different, or the supplier had the spec and they called it something else. There was a lot of difference in how the data was being kept based upon their manufacturing locations, their third parties, and their suppliers. Sorry, third-party manufacturers, suppliers.
I'm just thinking through like the challenge of it. I know I'm on the design side. I'm also on the manufacturing side. And the challenge is that a lot of our competitors are facing, in this case, I work with a team called IDP Direct, and we own our factories, right? So like we literally own from the land to the roof, like the entire buildings in Asia and in Europe. And we're able to collect with a third party. We're able to collect all of our scope 3, scope 4 data and provide that pretty easily. And in talking to them, it's like, well, how are some of our competitors doing this that are distributors, right? Because they don't own the factories, and sometimes they'll quote a factory and then that factory will quote somebody else. And it's like, how do brands manage that information? Because it's never clear. It's never like I ordered this product and I'm getting this product from this company and that's it. Right. There's like, right, there's suppliers of material, there's suppliers of everything. It's like, it's super, super complex. So having something like Specright where you can have it all in one location, I mean, that seems pretty straightforward. Like, why would you not do it versus spending 6 weeks to do something like this? So what kind of costs are involved with Specright?
So as we look at the platform, it's a platform and modules, and it's a question of how much do you want to toggle on? And we use the analogy a lot. We've built it. So it's almost like going into a dark house at night. We'll turn the light switches on based upon what rooms you're walking through. But if you're not using it, then we'll leave that dormant or dark for now. And then our intention is hopefully that we keep building a compelling reason for you to go into more of the house that we've built, right? Then user licenses are based upon roles. So somebody who's a admin or a super user where they're creating new specifications, they're creating workflows, they're operating kind of like a technical expert within the function or across many functions. That would be one area. Then there's a limited or read-only user where they're participating in things, but they're not really doing the creation. I have to validate this. I have to check this off. If I'm in quality looking at a new component spec, or I'm looking at an ingredient and making sure that there's proper certificates and fact panel, nutrition, those kind of governance steps, that's where you'll find that group. And then there's external parties. So different than a lot of other systems, you can have your third-party suppliers, you can have your customers access the system and share information out, which is a little different than some of the other systems that were built for governance and ERP, your QMS systems that tend to skew more towards, I want to govern everything internally and I don't want other people participating in it. We built the platform with the idea that, well, you're not working alone. You're working with a number of different partners in the value chain. How do we connect all that information so that you're seeing your data in a common pane of glass? How can we extend that to your external partners and parties as well? So, okay. And then the next question would be is integration. What systems do you want us to integrate with? Because we spend a lot of time having conversations about Microsoft, Oracle, and SAP, because those are systems that are running the business. And to get the best or most accurate information that you trust, we need to pull it from those systems and merge it with the information that you trust from Specright.
If I'm a luxury brand and I'm really focused on retail packaging, paper bags, rigid boxes, gift boxes, all that stuff, that's my entry point into Specright. How do you get started? Like, how do we collect all that data?
Yeah, sure. Great question. And the first part is, where is it? Is it in your hands? Because sometimes it's in your supplier's hands, but first it's getting it and then getting it into a usable organization. So is it on PDF? Is it documents? Okay. We have a team called Spec Squad that can help you convert all that into digitized data so that you're not someone who is a senior engineer doesn't have to be keying data into fields in a system. Okay. So that's one method of how we help. Otherwise, if it's already in a system or you're guided in spreadsheets or SharePoint, how do we aggregate and pull it so that we can map it in and then make sense of it? That way you can search, where are these things that we did last year? Where are the things that are my lowest cost, my best practice, my most sustainable examples? Sometimes marketers have ideas that go away and sometimes they go back and ask for them. We can have those stored in the system and bring those back if they're captured. So there's quite a bit of, that's kind of the start point. And then from there, what other teams are struggling with their data? Is it procurement? Well, we always buy it from this supplier, but they've been having difficulties lately because financials, or maybe it's a disaster. One of their factories is in Florida during hurricane season, and it happens to be in the center of the pathway. Supply chain disruption is another area that we hear back from our customers that they're able to respond much faster based upon disruption or things that happen outside of their four walls because they have everything in an organized method and be able to take action.
All right. So we've got data collection, we've got data input, you've got the spec squad that's going to help me do that. Then I'm the brand. This is the platform. Then I bring in my manufacturers. I start bringing in everybody that's kind of working on this program.
Sure. So then so now you're a luxury brand and maybe part of your organizational goals, or you have an active consumer group that says, I want to understand a little bit more about the sustainability of your packaging. How are you going to get it? Well, first, you're going to have the materials, massive materials composition in Specright. Start there. That's the easy one to start with. This is what we're doing today. This is what we're intending to do tomorrow. that was 100% virgin material. This is recycled content. We're lightweighting. Here's another example. Those are ways that you can show progress to your customers. And in a retail space, a lot of those customers are asking for that because that's part of their goals. Whether you're a Costco or an Albertsons or Tesco, they're focusing on that very, very carefully. So that's an area where the brand can feel confident in what they're sharing out with their customers. Next step would be, I want to start making some claims based upon that, because that differentiates me from my competitor. That's where, well, if you have a claim, you better have your data, and I look at what's happened from my prior experience in skincare, we couldn't put any claim on a package unless we had done all of our testing.
Yeah.
This is where Specright as an FDA repository, we have the governance structure in place. Now, you might not be an FDA governed business, but that structure is in place so that you can trust that whatever's in the data, and as we track it from item created through item optimized, that any of those optimization steps that you're claiming as a benefit or a value, you can trust it.
I'm the brand, the platform, bringing in manufacturers. Now I've got, let's say, we'll stick with paper bags. I've got a paper bag. It's 180 GSM. It's printed one color. It's got a foil stamp and, woven paper handles or something. I've put in my manufacturer that makes that. I want to get it quoted. I can pass all the quote through Specright, or am I passing the quote through Specright, or am I doing a quote,
either or,
an RFQ, and then Specright kind of ties in? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, it's a question of what, either or is the answer. Okay. Short answer. If you've got things in place, we can feed that data with that system. So if it's one of the current MRP products that talk to your supply base already, we'll feed it with better information. And once it comes back from there, we can also extract that and pull it back. Here's what all the quotes were, and we can organize those by supplier. If it's in Specright, we have a lot of the same capability. I won't claim 100% because I don't know their capabilities as well as ours, but to be able to batch send, here's the specifications in my set of boxes to 4 or 5 suppliers. That all goes out as full spec documents, specs with documents, and redacted data where we have to protect current suppliers or things that are proprietary to us, of course. But then that information comes back, and there's really no question about, well, I didn't know what the spec was. No, you did, because you sent it. So, right. And you can also put governance in it. You're accepting that this will be the specification when you quote. So we hear that a lot from procurement teams. My part of that reason this whole transaction is governed in a software world is because you can hold every team accountable. We sent the spec. It's the proper spec.
Right.
You looked at it, you quoted it based upon it, and now we have common ground for what we think we're going to do together.
Got it. And then it also gives the opportunity for the manufacturer to come back and say, this is the spec. This is the material that we have on hand. Here are the similarities. You can make a decision. It's going to be 10% less or something like that, right? So you can have an actual data-driven conversation versus just on price.
Absolutely. So just to carry that thought further, optimization begins with, what do we have now? And once you have a real good understanding of it, what it does for you from a performance protection of the package. I think what packaging does, it protects the product first, then it communicates, then it elevates the experience. And I know there's more to it, but at least those three, You're capturing that first piece very well.
Let's say I'm quoting these bags. I've got a quote back from my manufacturer that's in the system. Can I open this up to other manufacturers that maybe I'm not familiar with, but they are already in the Specright system?
Absolutely. So Specright Network is a part of our capabilities where the solution providers or suppliers are building their specs in and making them available to those on the platform. So if you have a bag, certain dimensions, GSM, attributes, you can search Specright Network for those. And then you'll see the the candidates that come out of that search. And then you can communicate directly with them. I want to learn more about this. Can I have that spec? Because there's some privilege that you have to ask for. But as soon as, think of it this way, if both parties are agreed that, yeah, this is a good idea, essentially this spec gets shared and it becomes a start of them with their spec that's pre-populates yours. And then you can put the rest of your business information. So you're not rekeying things in, you're not lifting and shifting drawings. It's happening with accept new spec, done.
I'm just thinking if from a brand perspective, I've got access to this. I've got all my specifications in one place. I'm doing my RFQs, going through those processes. I can actually just put my specs in here. I see my suppliers, I get quoting, and then I can go ahead and just open up to the rest of the network and be like, hey, these other companies can do it. Let me get pricing on these. And then you compare it all within the system. Does Specright get paid on somebody buying through the network?
Nope. We're focusing on connecting people and ensuring that everybody trusts the data that they're sharing and working on together.
And then if I'm, right, so that's like retail, bags, boxes. And if I'm like let's pick a luxury brand that's got fragrance, right? If I'm a fragrance company, I've got all my specifications in there, all the specifications on the actual juice that's in the bottles, the bottle material, the pump, everything, the box, out to the master cart, like from the liquid to the carton that it delivers in. Now my team in formulations, like, we're going to change this ingredient. They change it in here. Am I able to quickly then identify that this material and this pump, or this material and this acrylic, are going to have issues?
Potentially. And let me kind of break it down. And this is, I'm not going to boil the ocean with this one, but if it's in there, this alcohol, water, and fragrance oil combination works with this packaging component and this pump. And now, I'm sure anyone from the pump manufacturer is going to say, stop, there's more to it. You're absolutely right. There's much more to it. But if it works and you switch one of those components, you can start with, well, it works. Can we paper clear and do the test in parallel? So maybe you don't get a true pass, but you might start your process early instead of waiting for 4 to 8 weeks for a compatibility study. Okay. The other thing is, and this is, again, regulation gives us new challenges. I now have to claim the allergens in that fragrance if you're selling into North America. I think this is already in place in Europe, so might be over my skis on that one. But now that allergen from the previous now has to go through a regulatory gated process because we have to check for that allergen. And do we have to make a claim or change the label to inform our consumers based upon something that we changed here? So whether it's regulatory and safety driven, or whether it's speed and reaction driven, or optimization driven, because you might be looking at this for a lower cost or a different geography. Those are all pivot points from having it in the system first and having it gone through the rigors of evaluation, and now you can trust it.
I was like, the pieces are starting to come together in my head. One of the things I discuss pretty frequently is artificial intelligence and kind of the way it's changing packaging. The other conversation I'm having is how AI is moving so quickly, and AI is fast becoming the consumer. It's making decisions for us, purchasing decisions, and a big part of AI making decisions for us is the data. It doesn't care if your packaging is green or blue or red or your logo is big or small. All it cares about is the actual information. So if it's a fragrance, a food, a beverage, it wants to know about the allergens. It wants to know about the products inside of it. And a lot of times that information isn't the easiest to access on a pack. But as we start collecting all the information in here, and we kind of think about like the way that AI is driven by data, I mean, this starts to make a big difference for our future.
Yeah, I can't remember which of the industry events in the past 12 months, but Matthew, our founder, CEO, did a talk track on this, and really the punchline of it is AI is going to do great things, and AI is going to help a lot of different industries and different human use cases, but it has to be fed proper data. And that's true. I said in a Suppliers Day conversation in last May, and the teams that were looking at AI for iterative processes for compatibility and performance or validation of their claims were using AI, but they were in the audience asking, but we need your help. We need your data to be able to teach the AI to be better. So whether it's past history that guides new development or ongoing launches and products and events that are shaping what our best practices are, AI is going to use all that to help us.
No. And then are you incorporating AI into Specright at the moment? Or is it already built in?
We have not true AI, machine learning so far. Mm-hmm. And the example here is where we're ingesting a document. An example for our discussion is a certificate of analysis. We have a COA gets sent to an email that character recognition looks at what's on the page, pulls the information off of that PDF or Word document, whatever file sent, scanned image, and starts populating that into a new spec record. That means, okay, I now have a COA that I'm tracking the attributes. If I'm in a food industry, I'm tracking bacterial plate counts or other very important metrics. I can track those. I can chart those because I've got it in the field. I don't have to scrape it off a page. I don't have to key it in myself. It's all there.
Doesn't have to be a North American brand. You're global, so it can be a European brand, can be a South American brand. Doesn't matter. Correct?
That is correct. We have customers that are on 5 continents right now.
That's great. And then in the US, you guys have the Spec Summit that's coming up. So if anybody wants to come to Austin, that's right. It's in Austin this year.
Yes, in Austin, Texas, January 31st through February 2nd. The registration is filling up fast, but we still have places, and it's not the typical user group. It's really built with the intention that, yes, there are current customers there. There are those who are considering joining the platform, but it's built around informing everyone in attendance what others are using the platform for, industry trends from Gartner and other experts, and panels of experts from IT and R&D functions that are talking about some of those bigger challenges that are yet to come with regulation and transparency of their reporting and data for sustainability or safety and governance.
No, amazing. Tom, thank you so much. I appreciate this. So if anybody wants to reach out to Tom, learn more about Specright, you can go to specright.com, or you can reach out to Tom at Thomas Preston on LinkedIn. I'll have a link in the show notes to reach out to Tom.